Still getting around to that fix on your car? You got this. On eBay, you'll find millions of parts guaranteed to fit. Doesn't matter if it's a major engine repair or your first time swapping your windshield wipers. eBay has that part you need, ready to click perfectly into place for changes big and small. Loud or quiet, find all the parts you need at prices you'll love. Guaranteed to fit every time. But you already know that. eBay. Things, people, love. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply.
The Red Apple Media Podcast Network presents This is Protecting America. Now, here's Emmy-winning journalist RitaCosby.
And welcome to another edition of Protecting America. I'm RitaCosby. Big protests this week in New York City as the leader of Iran spoke at the United Nations. And this comes as the Biden administration did a very controversial and questionable deal with Iran in terms of a prisoner swap and unfreezing, get this, $6 billion to Iran. Well, joining us now to talk about all of this is Alireza Jafarzadeh. He is the Deputy Director of the National Council of Resistance of Iran, one of the heroes for freedom out there fighting, and also one of the big leaders of the protests outside of the UN. Alireza, great to have you here on the podcast.
Always great to be with you, Rita. Always a pleasure and very happy to join you.
Talk about how, first off, it was so important for you and thousands of others to be there outside of the UN and sending the message. What was the message you wanted the world to hear loud and clear?
Well, the message that several thousand Iranian Americans sent this week by gathering in front of the United Nations, just right across, filling almost the entire Dag Hammarskjöld Plaza, which is a big park in front of the UN, was to tell the United Nations and all of the member states of the UN that the Iranian regime's president, Ebrahim Raisi, does not belong to the UN. It contradicts all of the charters, all of the things that they have ratified. Instead, he should be before UN panels, before international criminal courts, to be held accountable, to be tried for crimes against humanity and genocide, because it's not that he just represents a bad regime, a repressive regime. In addition to all of that, he personally has been involved in murder and killing in big scale. In 1988, Ebrahim Raisi sat on a 4-member panel known as the Death Commission that was tasked by then Supreme Leader Ruhollah Khomeini, who preceded Ali Khamenei. And based on a fatwa, which is a religious decree issued by Supreme Leader Khomeini, that anyone who is in any way associated with the main Iranian opposition group known as the MEK, which basically spells freedom, they need to be killed. And so they assigned this panel to interview every single political prisoner in the entire country of Iran and determine, if they are loyal to that movement, to the movement for freedom or not. If they were, they would send them into a hallway that at the end of the hall, there were gallows and hanging them. In a matter of few weeks in summer of 1988, as many as 30,000 political prisoners were murdered. Of course, at the time, it was all secret. And later on, the information spilled and all the details came out. And it's now totally undisputed. There were a lot of investigation done by various human rights bodies, including the United Nations. And Raisi was part of it. He played a key role in killing people, and now you have him at the United Nations. So the protesters this week wanted to make sure that the world knows it and hears it, that it's really a shame to allow Ebrahim Raisi to speak there, use that forum, but also it's very counterproductive because Iran is not recognized by its repressive rulers. it must be recognized by its people and its organized resistance, those who are trying to establish freedom and democracy in Iran, and they've been fighting for over 40 years for it. So that was the message that I think it was clearly received. What they do with it is a different thing, but the media was out there, and the very loud and clear message that was sent to that building there. And we have to see how the Biden administration, how other world leaders later this week would react to that kind of a reaction by the Iranians who have been affected by this.
Alireza, what did you make of this deal? So many people have been critical of it. It was a prisoner swap, as you know, 5 Americans for 5 Iranians. And obviously, we're happy that the Americans came home. That's obviously so important and was so emotional to see that. But do we send a bad message, especially on the part that we gave them $6 billion of that assets are now being unfrozen, that even though they say, yeah, it's for humanitarian reasons, that's what the U.S. government's saying. How do we know that?
Well, first of all, as you said, Rita, I mean, those prisoners should have never been held as prisoners to begin with. They shouldn't have been taken hostage to begin with. But they should have been released long ago if a firm policy was pursued. And the reason I insist on it is that, this is not the first time that you hear the Iran regime is holding hostage and then getting into negotiations in releasing them. So they have a history of nearly 4 decades of hostage taking, dating back to the 1980s. Remember in Lebanon, they were, the Terry Anderson and all of the, the ordeal that a lot of Americans and Europeans went through. They were all captives of the Iranian regime or their proxies. And at the end of the day, they would get some kind of concession, whether it was money or other things that they want, and then release, 2 or 3 hostages and then take another 5 or 6. That has become a trend. So it's very clear that when you get into a swap, a sort of like a hostage diplomacy, and you pay ransom to release some of those hostages, you're setting up yourself for more Americans, more Europeans to be taken hostage. So it's good to have hostages released, but it's terrible to have more hostages taken. And it's even worse that making hostage taking and terrorism a very profitable business for the Ayatollahs in Tehran. The cornerstone of their foreign policy is built on terrorism. That's how they have been dealing with the rest of the world for the past 40 years. So you have to turn that around. You have to overturn that, not to further solidify that policy of hostage taking. That's one thing. Second, that $6 billion that has been sent to the Iranian regime, first of all, it's the money belonging to the people of Iran, not the Iranian regime. When you give that money to the Ayatollahs, they further use it for terrorism, but also suppressing their own population. This whole notion that this is for humanitarian purposes is absolutely ridiculous, because money is fungible. Anywhere else it's like that, but particularly when it comes to the Iranian regime. They have said it before, even in regard to this $6 billion, Raisi has been on the record saying, we will use this money any way we want. This is our money, we'll use it any way we want. So it makes no sense to say that this is for humanitarian purposes. Even if it was used for that, then, the money that was for humanitarian purposes, that would be released and made available to pay for the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guards, who were suppressing people or funding their proxies outside of Iran. We just put out a report last week saying that showing with documentations and evidence that during the uprising in Iran in the past 1 year, the Iranian regime had allocated an additional $700 million to the Iranian Revolutionary Guards and other suppressive agencies to kill people to quash the protesters. This is in addition to about $50 billion that Iran has spent in Syria to keep the dictator Assad in power, funding the proxies that Iran has there. So, that's why providing $6 billion to the regime is absolutely unacceptable, because certainly that will be used for, funding terror and killing people inside the country. Now, what do you do with this? What do you do with the Iranian regime? You have to pursue a totally different policy that was pursued in the past. That policy has to be centered around building pressure on the Iranian regime, holding them accountable for their hostage-taking, not rewarding them, making them pay for their terrorism. So this way, the Iranian people who have already risen up, who have already been involved in trying to bring about change in Iran, they would have more space. They would have more ability to expand their activities, their operations, and eventually overthrow this regime. That's the real solution. Now, of course, when I say overthrow, we're not asking the United States or Europe or anybody else to overthrow the regime for the people of Iran. It's the job and the responsibility of the people of Iran, but the outside world can help by not helping the regime, by not empowering the regime, by not funding the Iranian regime. That's the ask.
Do you believe, as we saw the protests that took place, as you talked about, I know this was the anniversary not that long ago, that there is tremendous will within Iran and that there is an ability, if indeed, like you said, that the U.S. and others don't help Iran, don't fund them, don't even unfreeze, even if they claim it's for humanitarian reasons. Do you believe that there is enough of a resistance internally?
Absolutely. The resistance in Iran is very, very powerful. I mean, of course, Iran is a big country, it's 85 million population. It's huge in terms of size and, strategic resources and all of that. It's not comparable to any other, smaller countries in the region. And it has a very repressive regime with all kinds of, repressive agencies from Revolutionary Guards, the Basij, and all of those things. But yet, at the same time, the biggest asset regarding Iran is its own population, the educated, the young people. And on top of that is the organized resistance, because it's definitely necessary to have a defined population to overthrow a repressive system. But it's even more important than that to have an organized opposition. When we talk about organized opposition, there is a history behind what you see in Iran. The National Council of Resistance of Iran, which is a parliament in exile, has been in existence since 1981. They have paid a high price. They have been over 100,000 members and their supporters have been killed by the Iran regime. These are intellectuals who were handpicked one by one by the Iran regime and got killed. Just in summer of 1988, 30,000 of them were massacred. But because they have a very clear agenda, they're very committed, they have a clear leadership, and they've been very effective. All of the major nuclear sites of Iran were exposed by this movement. The terror network, the terror operation of the regime was exposed by this movement. They're playing a key role in leading and continuing the protests inside the country. They are the main preoccupation in the minds of the Ayatollahs. They're threatened by this movement. That's why they're plotting against them. Just in 2018, just give you one example, this movement every year they have a big annual rally that about 100,000 people gather in a huge place near Paris, and they were doing it every year, very successful. In 2018, the Iranian regime plotted to bomb that place, and one of their own diplomats that was based in Vienna brought a bomb from Iran, a sophisticated one, brought a bomb from Iran on commercial airplane, covered in the diplomatic pouch. gave it to two culprits in Luxembourg to drive that bomb to Paris to detonate it. But just hours before they were successful in doing it, all of them were arrested. The diplomat, the other culprits, the collaborators, and then there was a trial in Belgium that went for about a year. And that guy, the so-called diplomat, Asdullah Assadi, was convicted of terrorism, sentenced to 20 years imprisonment, and all the other culprits were also imprisoned. Now, that tells you if you have a diplomat himself carrying the bomb, that how important it is for the regime. They were almost confident that they're going to be successful. Of course, they weren't. But it just shows you how far the regime would go, what kind of risk they take in order to deliver a blow to this movement. They have done so many other terror plots in different places because they are threatened by this movement. They know, this movement have what they call resistance units inside the country. These are young people, mostly who are very, very smart, very savvy, and they're taking the risk. And, they're the ones who are in the forefront of these protests. And that's why we feel, if the outside world would do its own part, which is don't give money and resources to the regime, this regime can easily fall under the weight of the discontent of the population, but also the force and the power of the organized opposition if the assistance by the outside world is cut off to this regime. That would make a huge difference. Remember, in South Africa, the world got united in putting sanctions and really squeezing the apartheid regime. And then eventually you saw what happened there. That kind of a pressure we have never seen in the past 40 years against the Iranian regime. And this regime is far, far worse in every aspect you want to think about than the apartheid regime in South Africa. And the reason that the outside world is not doing it because they're afraid. They're afraid of terrorism of the Iranian regime. They're afraid that their people are going to be taken hostage. So long as that fear exists among the outside world, nothing is going to change. And that's why we're trying the outside world to say, look, you have a lot more power than the Ayatollahs. You have the defiant people of Iran on your side. So just do the right thing and just don't repeat the failed policies of the past.
How dangerous is the Iranian regime for America and for the world?
They're the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism, period. They are the epicenter of terror, period. They are like, the nucleus of this Islamic fundamentalist ideology that has, been imposed on the region since the Supreme Leader Khomeini took power, actually stole the leadership of a genuine revolution in 1979 and imposed that ideology there. And therefore, certainly they are the most dangerous. They are the biggest threat to the whole world. But at the same time, they're most vulnerable. They have their own Achilles heel. You have to understand that the Achilles heel of the Iranian regime it's internal situation. It's the defiant population. It's the organized resistance. And what the regime is trying to do, they want to hide this Achilles heel. They want to, project power as though they're they're invincible. They're not. And that's why we have to understand that at the same time that they're dangerous, but at the same time, they're extremely vulnerable. All we need to do is just, to show to the world, here's the Achilles heel. This is where you want to strike. And that's where you want to invest. You want to invest in the people of Iran, in the organized opposition, not invest in the regime itself.
I want to ask you about the women very quickly, because they've been extraordinarily heroic. Of course, that was much of the focus of the uprising. Absolutely.
Women have played a significant role in the history of the past 40 years of resistance against the regime. You cannot talk about Iranian resistance. You cannot talk about Iranian opposition. You cannot talk about a bright future without talking about the role of women. in Iran. And when we talk about the role of women, it's not limited to certain issues like, the mandatory hijab or that kind of stuff, kind of pressure that the regime is imposing. It's far, far deeper than that. It's about leadership. It's about political leadership. And that's what the regime wants to suppress. And that's what the regime wants you not to look at. They want to just limit it as though, whether should or should not have their own, hairs covered and all of that. In our movement, the women play a leading role. The main organization within the Parliament in Exile is called the MEK. That's the group that has a lot of strength inside Iran, but also outside of Iran. And they're the ones who gained all access to the information on the nuclear issue and all of that. Within that movement, women have been in the leadership of that organization since 39 years ago. And consistently, all of their secretaries general are women. It didn't happen by accident, but it just emerged as the necessity of their fight against Islamic fundamentalism. The core of the ideology of Islamic fundamentalism is misogyny. Right at the core of it, the worst element in that ideology is their hatred against women and the misogyny. So if you want to counter that ideology, you have to do exactly the opposite. So that's why this, tremendously powerful force of women was actually discovered within our movement as a result of when you get engaged in your fight, you discover things. When only you don't, not by reading books, but by engaging in that fight against the regime, and that's how women, found their own role within the movement and expanded that. They created a culture of defiance and against the regime. So that culture that was developed over the years is what you see now in the streets of Iran. The 18 years old, the 16-year-old girls who were not even born in 1988, when those women said no to the Ayatollahs and were sent before the gallows, they picked up that culture from the previous generations. And that's why, we have a specific plan in our movement on the issue of women, detailing every single aspect of that is all based on choice, not dominance of men over women. That's the way the ideology of the Ayatollahs are. But most important, all of them is their role in the leadership. Unless you have the society which has the proper place for the leadership of women, especially a Muslim society like Iran, nothing is going to change. And thank God, and I think one of the reasons I'm extremely hopeful that change will come is because the role that women are playing in this movement. And I hope everyone will pay attention to this one. It's not an accident that you saw the women taking the leadership in the streets and, protesting against the Ayatollahs and everything. There is a history behind it. And you will see, our leader, Mrs. Rajavi, she had a speech 27 years ago in London, and she warned the mullahs. She told them, you don't even consider women as second-class citizens. You don't even see them. But I promise you right here that the rule of the Ayatollahs will be swept away from the history of Iran by women, led by women. And at that time, no one could see what actually is happening now in the streets of Iran. But she had that vision. She saw it. And I can promise you that day will come, and it will come very soon.
Running a business comes with a lot of what-ifs. But luckily, there's a simple answer to them. Shopify. It's the commerce platform behind millions of businesses, including Thrive Cosmetics and Momofuku. And it'll help you with everything you need. From website design and marketing to boosting sales and expanding operations, Shopify can get the job done and make your dream a reality. Turn those what-ifs into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
Well, that's great to hear. And everyone, by the way, be sure to subscribe and share to this such a powerful podcast. What a great discussion. Alireza, it was really terrific to have you on. And boy, I applaud your fight for freedom in Iran and around the world. And great to hear so many courageous people speaking out about freedom within your country. It really is tremendous and deeply inspiring. Alireza, great to have you here.
Thank you so much, Rita, for providing this opportunity. I really cherish the work you're doing, how you're, informing the American public about very, very important issues and providing the opportunity for me to speak. And I'm always very delighted to be on your show and very much welcome it. Thank you so much.
And everybody, I'll be back soon with another great edition of Protecting America. And of course, you can catch me every weeknight, 10 p.m. to midnight on the legendary WABC Radio. This is RitaCosby, and thanks for all you do to protect America.
Hello, folks. Larry Kudlow here. Pay attention, because China is leading the largest anti-American alliance since World War II. One that's already dumped U.S. bonds, grabbed 43 million acres of our farmland, and is plotting to dethrone the dollar. That's why IRA and 401k savers are protecting their savings with gold. Please go to freegoldguide.com/Kudlow or just call 800-621-3908 for your free gold guide on how to protect your wealth with gold 100% tax-free.